Budget breakdown. The One House budgets have been released, giving us a better look at the items that lawmakers are looking to fund. We'll speak with an education advocate on how the budgets will impact our schools. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Budget season continues to roll on here at the Capitol. The Senate and the Assembly releasing their budget proposals this week as sort of a rebuttal to the governor's executive budget. The release of these budgets begins a negotiation process that will continue until the budget is due on April 1st. While the budgets differ in some aspects, both are unified in rejecting the governor's education funding plan. The recommended increases in education spending totaling $46 billion, also rejecting the proposed changes to the foundation aid formula. Joining us now to give reaction on these One House budgets as well as the current state of education funding in New York, Bob Lowery. He's the Deputy Director for Advocacy, Research, and Communications with the State Council of School Superintendents. Bob, I don't know how you fit that on a business card, but welcome to the show.
Yep, thank you. It's hard to write on sign-in sheets too.
I bet. Let's talk about where we're at with the funding right now. Obviously, you saw the governor's plan. I know there was a lot of apprehension about that because the school aid formula was not what people wanted. Now the lawmakers have theirs. Where do we stand right now?
We're very encouraged by the budgets that were passed by the Assembly and Senate yesterday. Both would restore the cuts that Governor Hochul proposed, as well as provide a guaranteed minimum increase in foundation aid for all districts. I would say that we should give credit where it's due. Governor Hochul did follow through on a commitment to fully fund foundation aid, so that's a positive. But that's one reason why the cuts this year were surprising and alarming to many school leaders.
Did you ever get an explanation on why the cut came after initially putting it in there a year ago, and then all of a sudden it's going away a little bit? Was it just the fiscal restraints this year? Is that what you were told?
Yes, I think that's the primary concern is uncertainty over states' finances. I think a couple of weeks ago, the three parties, Governor, Assembly, and Senate, agreed that the state will take in more revenue, $1.3 billion more than what the governor's budget assumed. So trends have been positive, but I believe that the primary reason for the school aid cuts was concern about the overall state financial outlook.
Is that part of this whole process? I would think a layperson wouldn't understand that. You would assume the state knows exactly how much money it's getting every year coming in the door versus what's going out, but that can change, right, depending on retail sales receipts, tax receipts, all sorts of a variety of things feed into the pool of money, correct?
That's true. New York State's revenues are somewhat volatile, unpredictable, relying on primarily on personal income tax. So more people are working, and particularly the financial sector. If bonuses paid to Wall Street businessmen, that can have a huge impact on the state's overall outlook. And as I say, that can be somewhat unpredictable from one year to the next.
Now, lawmakers want to put the money back in that was cut for that foundation aid. First of all, for those who don't understand, what is foundation aid versus normal aid? Is there a difference in them? Do one go for one thing and something go for something else?
Good question. Yes, foundation aid accounts for about 70% of total school aid. It's general purpose operating aid, which districts can use for any purpose. There are other formulas: transportation aid, building aid, aid to help districts pay for the cost of special education, textbooks, so forth and so on. But foundation aid is the largest by far, and it is, as I say, unrestricted general purpose operating aid. This particular formula was a result of major reform enacted in 2007 after the culmination of a lawsuit challenging this constitutionality of the state's school finance system. And as I say, enacted in 2007, but it was not fully funded until this current school year, 2023-24. The budget that was enacted last spring.
That's also part of the equation. I don't think people understand, do they, Bob? That I can start a program, I can fund it, but if I don't fund it, it doesn't really matter. It's toothless in a way, isn't it? I mean, you could say we're going to have X, Y, and Z, but if lawmakers don't put forth the money to fund it, it's just going to sit there an empty shell.
Yes, that's true. With typical programs, smaller programs, grants for student mental health services, for example. It took a while for the state to get money out the door to school districts for that purpose. But school aid formulas, they are there. But as I say, foundation aid up until this year was never funded at the level that was anticipated by the reforms enacted back in 2007.
Have we heard from the governor, her reaction to them putting the aid back in? Is she amenable to it, or is she sort of fighting a little bit, saying, guys, we need that money elsewhere? Where is this going to land, I wonder?
I have not heard reactions from the governor to what the legislature did this week. She has, expressed concerns about school aid funding, asserted that the increases of recent years were not sustainable. And something that we've emphasized is we had advised superintendents and other school officials that once we got to full funding and as inflation slowed, the increases would moderate on their own significantly, and they did. So that has been a concern of the governor. As I say, haven't heard responses since the legislature took its action yesterday in approving the one house budgets.
Is it fair for me, this was my reaction just as a homeowner in upstate New York, when I heard the aid was going back in, I was happy because my thought was if they don't fully fund education, what's going to end up happening is these local districts are going to go to their taxpayers and say, look, the governor left us short, we need to raise taxes in order, or we're going to have to cut programs, maybe it won't be after school sports, whatever. So in a way, for the homeowner across the state, is this good news if the state fully funds?
Short answer, yes, definitely. The cuts that the governor proposed, there were really two. One was a lower inflation factor, such that, well, first of all, approximately half the districts, almost exactly half the districts, would receive actual year-to-year reductions in their foundation aid under the governor's proposal. The others would receive smaller increases than the formula now in law would provide. So for half the districts, as I say, they are losing aid, and in some cases, losing aid compared to what they received last year. And in some cases, the cuts were quite dramatic. And so we had districts warning that layoffs might be necessary. I would say that with the property tax cap, that makes it harder for districts to raise property taxes, need to gain voter approval to go above the so-called cap. It's necessary to have 60% of voters approve. So in times past, it might have been the case when there was a drastic cut in state aid, districts could ask their taxpayers for an increase, an unusually large increase, and voters would approve. But now I think with the property tax cap, there's been an expectation that 2% is reasonable, and have to gain 60% of voters for an increase above that cap. And if voter approval is not forthcoming, you're not allowed to raise your tax levy at all.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. To sum that up, if you cut the aid and if they don't vote for it, you end up with cuts anyway. Bob, we'll have to leave it there. Bob Lowry with the State Council of School Superintendents. Good luck with your fight. I know it's not over yet. Budget's a couple weeks off here, so we wish you well as we head towards April 1st. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted so much of daily life for well over 2 years, but now as recommendations are changing, some are taking a look back. When we return, we'll be hearing from a former assemblyman on his calls for the state to learn from its response, perhaps its mistakes, during the pandemic. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. The coronavirus pandemic severely impacted many parts of life for years, but new guidance from the CDC sees a much more relaxed response to the virus now. CDC changing its recommendations, saying that people who get COVID-19 no longer need to stay in isolation for 5 days. They now recommend that patients can go back to school or work when their symptoms improve and they're fever-free for 24 hours. This, as recent CDC reports show, new COVID hospital admissions are at about 15,000 nationwide. Compare that to nearly 6 million in 2020. The state, meanwhile, is still working to ensure older residents have adequate protection from respiratory illness. Department of Health launching a campaign encouraging New Yorkers 65 and older to get vaccinated against the flu and COVID-19, explaining the vaccine is effective at preventing infection and severe symptoms. Now, adding to the COVID response, former Governor Andrew Cuomo has been subpoenaed by a federal House committee investigating nursing home deaths. That committee is specifically looking into how New York implemented guidance about nursing home safety at the start of the pandemic. A report from the New York Attorney General's office found that the state undercounted the number of nursing home deaths by up to 50%. The former governor is calling the subpoena politically motivated, saying that he had agreed to answer questions from the commission in writing. Joining us now is Richard Gottfried, a former New York Assemblyman, adding to those calling for kind of a critical look back at the state's COVID response. Richard, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You got my attention recently when I saw kind of a press release go out saying, hey, guys, let's put together a commission. Let's really look at this seriously. Walk us through that. What is it you'd like to see?
Well, the bill to create the commission is introduced by Assembly Member Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. I worked with her on the drafting of it. The goal is to create a commission. People often compare these things to things like the 9/11 Commission that would have a broad and professional makeup, people appointed by the governor and the legislative leaders of the two parties in both houses. It would include people recommended by the deans of the state's schools of public health and county and city health commissioners and the like. It would hold public hearings. It would issue a preliminary report and a final report. The goal here, the pandemic was obviously a massive event in the life of New Yorkers and the whole world. I think New York responded better than probably any other state. We did a lot of things right. A lot of things that are built into our system were very helpful to us. But obviously there were shortcomings. There were some things we did wrong. We are guaranteed to have epidemics, pandemics like this again. Just in recent years, we've had a couple of very, close calls with an Ebola outbreak about 20 years ago and the Zika outbreak. So this kind of horror is going to hit us again. And I think it's important, not that we pat ourselves on the back, not that we point fingers of blame, but that we professionally learn what we did right, what we didn't do right, what we need to do better, because there is going to be a next time.
A critical eye might, looking at this, see if you go back in time, because we're distanced from it now. We had a governor at the time who was shopping around a book deal for a lot of money. You also had a lot of nursing home deaths, some of them being labeled as something else. A critical eye might think that there was some not so clear, maybe some shady stuff going on to keep those numbers from going public. Is that fair? And is that kind of a thing you want to look into with this commission? What was going on in the nursing homes? What was going on with how deaths were being reported?
Yeah, I don't buy into a lot of the criticism of the Cuomo administration. I think, in many ways, New Yorkers and people around the country really admired a lot of what New York did in response. But there are certainly a lot of questions. A lot of people died in nursing homes. Many public health people think that that was kind of inevitable in our nursing homes. Many think the Cuomo administration did a couple of things wrong, and that contributed to those deaths. I think that all needs to be professionally and as dispassionately as possible examined. And now that we've got a little distance between us and those events, I think is a good time to really look into it in depth and see what we did right and what we did not get right. It's good that there's been a couple of years since the worst of it, so we can, look at it with hindsight. On the other hand, I don't think we should wait too long to do this, because people are going to begin to forget about the details of what happened. And also, any day now, the next epidemic could hit us. There's nothing guarantees that there's a century between epidemics. Right.
Richard, real quick, would the current governor and former governor both argue that, well, we don't need a commission. We're already looking into it. We've looked at it. We're doing this already. We don't need a special commission. What would you say to that?
Well, it's good that Governor Hochul has put a consultant operation to work looking at this, but that's one viewpoint. They are not going to have the authority to issue subpoenas if necessary. There are, medical records and whatnot that this study ought to be able to look at, and I don't think this consultant can have legal authority to get a lot of the records that it needs to look at. This commission would have that authority. Of course, the bill has language protecting the confidentiality of those records. And, one set of consultants is one set of consultants. This commission would bring in diverse viewpoints, professional viewpoints, people from our local health departments that played a key role and were often felt that they were not really given an adequate role. It would include representation from New York's really terrific collection of schools of public health. So you'd have an independent, professional, academic viewpoint looking at all of this. So I think both for the quality of the review and for New Yorkers to have confidence in that review, I think this kind of commission is the answer.
We've only got 20 seconds left, so it's not fair to give you that little time, but I'm going to ask you anyway. A lot of criticism has been about the lockdown of the schools for so long. Do you think that's one area that we need to look at, that maybe a mistake was made there, the kids could have got back quicker, maybe isolate the elderly, get them the shots, but the kids don't worry? Because it seems like it's done some damage and these kids are behind.
That's certainly one of the things we ought to be looking at. And we are guaranteed to confront that issue again, and we ought to re-examine that and determine whether it was medically justified, whether educationally all the steps that were available that could have minimized the disruption to kids was all that taken care of. I certainly don't have those answers, but this commission would be able to bring in people who could give us those answers.
All right, Richard, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for coming on today, and we'll keep following your voice to see if others listen and they get this commission together. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
The One House budgets have been released, and they are lacking a critical need in New York, according to Governor Kathy Hochul. When we return, a closer look at the ways lawmakers are looking to spend money on housing in the state. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. The governor making it clear in her executive budget that housing is a priority, setting aside some $500 million for new housing in the state. However, state lawmakers expressing a different priority, setting aside even more money for housing at over $13 billion. However, they're now adding plans to enhance tenant protections, invest in affordable housing, and create incentives for developers.
I'm obviously entertaining what they put forth. My job is to assess and analyze this and how this fits into the overall objective, which is to start building again. We desperately need more housing built in this state.
A reminder that budget is due on April 1st. Stick around, back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. Finally, in Empire State Weekly, during the budget season, one state agency is thinking of a different kind of green. Green New York Council, the entity charged with making state operations more sustainable. They're set to hold an update meeting this month. Now, at previous meetings, Green New York highlighted green energy efforts, like providing some $130 million to projects that work to improve water quality and to mitigate climate change here in the state. We'll keep an eye on any big updates and bring you the details and analysis as soon as they become available. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And a reminder, don't forget you can catch this show, Empire State Weekly, all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of the Empire State Weekly on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.